Hi guys, the reason the head of the RMT Union Mick Lynch is such a powerful figure when he speaks is because he talks in a very simple way, but with massive conviction. He isn't trying to sell something foreign to people. He isn't angry or bombastic, which is likely to turn off many listeners or viewers. He speaks in very matter-of-fact terms. So when he's challenged, he has his simple rebuttals, and the interviewer has no real comeback. Harry was speaking to the BBC about the so-called threat of wage inflationary spirals.
I know that you mentioned that you said that pay wasn't the biggest part of this. You would come to the pay at the end, but it is a part of it, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And I mean, look, you would have heard the argument, but I want to put it to you because there is the argument from government, there is the argument, certainly when it's come to other areas of public sector pay, that you simply cannot put up wages by the rate of inflation because the rate of inflation is so high and you end up in an inflationary spiral, which makes it worse for everyone and we all live with the pain for longer. You just simply can't have 9.4% pay rises.
Why don't you mention profits and dividends in that? I mean, the only analysis we ever get from the media is that it's workers, often who are the lowest paid people in this country, are responsible for inflation. That's patently untrue in this period because the inflation was there before the pay round and it's been building all through the austerity and the public sector pay freeze. And there's a private sector pay freeze as well. So real wages have been in decline for many years, a decade probably.
But I mean, it would be a big hike to go up to 9.4% now.
Well, we need the inflation, RPI, the real measure of inflation, which they want to hide, is 11.8.
Right.
And for the 2 years that they're proposing that we go into a pay deal at the moment, it's likely that inflation would be 20% accumulative across those 2 years. Most of our people haven't had a pay rise for 2 or 3 years. If you're a nurse or a doctor or a care worker or a refuse worker, you may not have had a real terms pay rise for a decade. So it can hardly be true that it's wages that are causing inflation. It's profit taking that's causing inflation because the big corporations are not skimming their profits down and saying, I'll do a redistribution. We actually need to support wages in this economy. And that's what we're faced with. It can't be true that low paid workers are causing inflation. The problem with low paid workers is they haven't got enough money and it needs to be resolved through the pay packet.
Now, I'm not going to get into the detail of what is actually causing inflation at the moment. It seems to be the rising cost of energy. And of course, whatever you're producing, it requires energy and that cost is being passed on to the final consumer. And that's why we're seeing the rising prices of food and other items. But Mick is correct here when it comes to pay increases. Like if there's been a pay freeze for a number of years, then individuals, workers, they're not facing inflation of 8, 9, 10, or even 11%. We're talking about 20% or more than that. Because if you haven't had a pay rise in 2 years, then you're suffering the consequences of inflation last year and this year. And as he has pointed out as well, some workers, refuge workers and carers have not had a real pay rise in 10 years. Then they are really being screwed over by the impact of inflation. The bigger problem here, of course, is if people are not able to feed their families, to pay their bills, to live, and to spend money in the economy, what happens? The economy contracts. You're going to force people to choose between heating and eating or paying bills and feeding their family. They're not going to spend money in the economy. The economy is going to get smaller. You're going to see a recession. And of course, as always, who's hardest hit in a recession? The poor and the working class. People who rely most on public services. And what will the Tories do when there is a recession? Well, they're going to come out, whether it's Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, it doesn't really matter. They're going to talk about tightening belts. How we're all in this together, even though they're on, in one case, over £100,000 a year and the other, God knows how much. Both of these are going to talk about it's necessary now to cut back. We're going to have to cut back on public services. And of course, the Tories are fully supportive of this because they want smaller government. Government's job is basically to funnel money, public money, into the pockets of their donors or their supporters. That's what it's about. Public services don't really help donors at all unless it's been privatized. If it's not been privatized, then it's likely to be cut. And in some cases, it's cut in order to be privatized. Look at the NHS. So it's really damaging to the economy if you have people struggling to pay bills, struggling to pay to buy food, relying on food banks, relying on universal credit. This is not good for the economy. And expecting people to sit by and watch themselves grow deeper and deeper into poverty, and that's what we're talking about. This is poverty. If people's wages decrease and continue to decrease, then they're ending up in poverty. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.